Good evening and welcome to part 3 of our Licensing 101 session. Welcome new folks that are just joining us. My name is Jason Klein, Assistant Executive Director. And for the folks that have been with us for the last hour or two, thank you for sticking around. So as over the next 2 modules, we're going to be going through the difference between the temporary approval and annual licensing processes. This module is going to focus on the temporary approval process. So as part of our agenda, we're going to be going through the temporary approval licensing process, the procedures bulletin and workflow, the documents needed for a temporary approval application, the fees, various SEP resources available to social equity individual applicants, a few of the state and DCR deadlines that are applicable, and then we'll get into a question and answer session. So in order to submit a temporary approval application, you will have to have completed the pre-application review process, and that record will need to have been deemed eligible for further processing. We're currently accepting applications for non-volatile manufacturing, distribution, and testing labs from all applicants. Social equity individual applicants are also able to submit applications for non-storefront delivery, as well as cultivation processor and nursery license types. And then folks that were selected as part of phase 3 retail round 2 are eligible to go through the pre-application review process and then submit applications for the retail storefront commercial cannabis activity. We are not accepting applications for volatile manufacturing from any applicants. And then, of course, we did get some questions earlier in the presentation about on-site consumption and special events. And at this point, DCR is not accepting applications for those 2 activities either. So 2023 is a big year. The state is going to be phasing out their provisional licensing program and transitioning strictly to an annual application process. So DCR is also going to be transitioning away from temporary approval and into the annual licensing process so that we're in alignment with the state of California. Because of the dual licensing requirement, you do have to have a local license and a state license, as well as meet other permitting requirements in order to operate a commercial cannabis business. So in order to get a state annual license, you will have to have completed the city's annual licensing process and be issued an annual license in order to have a complete state application. So if you do not have a provisional license or you're unable to renew a provisional license, you will not be able to operate until you get that state annual license. So for folks that have not received temporary approval that don't have a state provisional license to utilize, it will be in your best interest to go into the annual application process so that you can meet these new state requirements. I'm going to be able to provide a timeline for the temporary license deadlines later in this section, typically at the end. So temporary approval is a DCR issued temporary license that authorizes an applicant to engage for a limited period of time in a commercial cannabis activity that would be permitted under an annual license or a non-temporary license. In terms of the mechanics for the provisional and temporary licenses, they were always intended to be temporary. They don't deal with CEQA compliance, which is the California Environmental Quality Act. So in order to get a provisional or temporary approval, businesses did not have to have an adopted environmental document, which is a requirement for the annual application process. The state is phasing out provisional licenses, which is going to necessitate the city phasing out its temporary approval process, because in order to qualify for a state annual license, businesses will need to get a local annual license and have DCR and the city council as the local agencies adopt the necessary environmental review documents. DCR has delegated authority from the city council, and the Cannabis Regulation Commission also has delegated authority from the city council for different license types. And then, of course, the Cannabis Regulation Commission or City Council may be second level arbiters for denials. So those are some of the things that go along with the decision of whether or not to issue an annual license, is when it gets to that first level decision maker and where appeals can be made. But DCR cannot adopt the environmental findings separate and apart from the discretionary action that it's tied to, which is the issuance of the annual license. So our temporary approval workflow is fairly unchanged, other than the fact that when we created the legal business entity record last year, we pulled all of the ownership, primary personnel, equity share, compliance with LAMC 10420 out of the application process, and we put it in its own record type. So once a business had been vetted and the ownership approved, or the equity share requirements have been met for the business, they wouldn't have to undergo that same review every time a new record was submitted, or every time they submitted a relocation request, or they needed to update their ownership. So that was an onerous requirement, and the director was able to use her promulgated authority to create the new record type to allow for us to do that review separate and apart from the application, and that streamlined the application process. So once the application gets submitted, the applicant has 30 days to pay. Certain applicants are eligible for fee waivers, such as Phase 3 retail round 2 applicants, and other social equity applicants may be eligible for a fee deferral by request. Once the application has been deemed filed, we begin reviewing the application. Once the application is complete, so all of the necessary document forms are filed, and then of course equity share review, if applicable, is necessary for the record has been completed, we issue a local compliance underway notice, as well as a notice of environmental review to let the state know that we've begun our environmental review of the project. Once we've completed that, if the equity share review hadn't already been completed, it will need to be completed, and the business will have the ability to request an initial inspection. Once those two things are done, we issue temporary approval, and we will begin accepting annual applications from new applicants and existing licensees beginning on Monday, May 1st. In terms of the information and procedures bulletin, we have this online and it's going to be phased out. So we haven't updated it to kind of reflect some of the new policies and some of the new timelines because it's going to be phased out, but it provides a general overview of what the temporary approval process is. And then of course, for the review that's applicable to either the equity share review or the ownership related documents, that's now just being done on the legal business entity record, but those processes remain the same. We just don't have to do it if a business that's already been verified is applying to operate at more than one location. So there's a savings there, and there's also a savings to applicants that want to establish their business and go through the equity share review and then bring on investors prior to submitting an application to reduce the holding costs from the period of time that they actually have to secure the location and when they can navigate through our application process. So in terms of the deadline requirements, once the pre-application review record has been deemed eligible for further processing, the applicant has 1 year to submit their application. Any pre-application review record that has not been utilized within that 1 year just gets closed out by operational law. Or if you lose site control and you submit the business premises surrender form, the record can be closed out or abandoned. A few of the things that folks can use as resources is we got the temporary approval workflow on our website. We've got the information and procedures bulletin. We've got information about the entity eligibility verification for the social equity program. And we have the refiling workflow. So if a temporary approval record was deemed abandoned and it's eligible for refiling, how general applicants and social equity applicants can go ahead and refile. For the required forms, it's a lot more streamlined now that the ownership of primary personnel documents are on the legal business entity record. So now we're looking at pretty much indemnification agreements and attestations and being able to identify the business premises diagrams and verify it for compliance. And then you're eligible for your initial inspection. So this application process and what these requirements are going to be very similar for the annual application, with the caveat that as part of the annual application, we do have to do the environmental review. So the Form 4013 will also be required as part of the annual application. But what we've tried to do is get the longer review taken care of on the legal business entity record. And we've created an internal unit that is focused on reviewing those legal business entity records. And that's all they're doing is doing those records and then doing the equity share reviews for the social equity businesses. And then that's going to allow licensing staff to focus on application processing and scheduling inspections. And what the director is trying to do now is she's trying to create a program that reduces the holding costs for applicants and licensees and gives them the most flexibility in determining when they're going to lock in a location, or they're going to make some of these core business decisions in terms of tenant improvements or pursuing different permits outside of DCR's regulatory bubble, and having a sufficient amount of peace of mind that they can get either a temporary license or an annual license before they have that large capital outlay. In terms of the indemnification agreement, you're indemnifying the city. So we do require notarized signatures there. It is a requirement within the municipal code. We also have the labor peace agreement. California law does require businesses with 10 or more employees to enter into a labor peace agreement. So it's just attesting that you're going to comply with state law. You'll also have to, comply with state law when you submit your state application. We do have the landowner attestation that is acknowledging that you as the lessee or an applicant have the legal right to occupy the business premises location and engage in the commercial cannabis activities that you're applying for. The temporary approval attestation is you're attesting that you understand the requirements and you meet all of the requirements for temporary approval. We also have an attestation for no alcohol or tobacco. Commercial cannabis businesses are not allowed to sell alcohol or tobacco at the site. So this is making sure that the owners of that business understand that they're not allowed to engage in alcoholic beverages or tobacco product sales at the business premises. And then we have the initial inspection attestation. Basically, it's giving you an overview of what DCR personnel will be looking at during the initial inspection, and you're attesting that you're ready for that initial inspection. If DCR personnel find any deficiencies during the initial inspection, you'll have an opportunity to cure those deficiencies, and if applicable, go through another inspection. The premises diagram, the Bureau of Cannabis Control, the Department of Cannabis Control, you can do your own business premises design. What we've seen is a lot of folks are doing more professional business premises designs that are intended to allow them to go through the fire department, the building department, water and power, and others that do require more than a basic drawing. We do accept those, but the bare minimum is a hand-drawn diagram that complies with these minimal requirements. Again, we are intending to reduce barriers to entry. So really, we're focused on only the things that are applicable to DCR and what's important to DCR. So if you do have to submit plans to the Department of Building and Safety, they will require something a little bit more than what this premises diagram is. So it's always a good idea to reach out to the building department, the fire department, and others to see whether or not you're going to have to either pull permits or do any work with them, so that when you start to put together those packages, you can identify what level of effort is going to be necessary to comply with all three. Most city agencies are not going to ding you if you do more than what they ask for, or it's done in a more professional manner. Folks will ding you if you don't meet their minimum requirements. So these are DCR's minimum requirements, and you get a gold star if your plans are professionally done and they would be accepted by the Department of Building and Safety. You also have to provide an executed lease agreement or some other form of site control. The business formation and organization documents are no longer required. They are on file on the legal business entity records. For the existing licensees, as part of the renewal process, they were required to create the legal business entity records so that those documents could be moved over. And of course, the equity share review documents are now in the legal business entity record too. For the formation and organization documents that we used to review as part of the temporary approval process, these have all gotten moved over to the legal business entity record. Folks are going to have a legal business entity record in order to submit their annual application. But for temporary approval applicants that don't have temporary approval, we are still reviewing those documents as part of your temporary approval application. But when you do get ready to move over for your annual application, you will have to make sure that they're uploaded to your legal business entity record. If we've already vetted these documents as part of your temporary approval application, and there's no changes between the documents that we've already reviewed and approved as part of your temporary approval application and the documents you upload to our legal business entity record, there are no additional fees for creating the legal business entity record. And then of course, we'll mark those documents as approved on the legal business entity record, which will expedite the processing of your annual application. If there are changes that need to be disclosed to the department and they're disclosed through the legal business entity record, you may be subject to modification fees. And then once we complete the vetting of your legal business entity record, of course, then we would be able to start working on and complete the review of your annual application. Same thing for the equity share documents. For new applicants, this review is being done on the legal business entity record. For existing phase 2, phase 3 retail round 1 applicants, this can be done as part of the temporary approval application process. If you do receive temporary approval and you go to submit your annual application, provided the documents haven't changed, we can go ahead and vet them on your legal business entity record, which will expedite the review of your annual application. If you don't reach temporary approval or your temporary approval record is abandoned, in order to refile, you will have to upload the documents to the legal business entity record and they will have to be vetted. So we're trying to reorganize and structure things with minimal impact on applicants and licensees. And to the extent that the information has already been reviewed and approved by the department, we're not going to be re-reviewing and charging additional fees, but if changes have been made, in lieu of charging you the larger filing fees, we would just charge the lesser modification fees for the changes that are occurring. So that's to help facilitate compliance and then the transition to our annual application process. I already went through fees for the temporary approval process earlier. The annual license application fee is $7,691. The temporary approval application fee for all applicants now is $5,720 because we're assessing the a la carte equity share review fee for businesses that need it on the legal business entity record. So that makes sure that the application fees are consistent. And then of course, for people who have already paid the $57.20, that covers the documents that are part of the temporary approval application, as well as the documents that are now living on the legal business entity record. So for those folks, we're not charging any additional fees provided the documents are the same between both records. For the social equity program, again, the intent of the social equity program is to promote equitable ownership and employment opportunities, to decrease disparities in life outcomes for marginalized communities, and to address disproportionate impacts on the war on drugs on those communities. Dr. Amani Brown and her team have put together a fairly robust social equity program that has business license and compliance assistance. They've implemented a learning management system, or LMS. Currently, there's over 140 hours of self-paced educational content and webinars on the LMS system. Every social equity individual applicant has access to the LMS. You can also reach out to the social equity team if you don't have access to it or you don't know your password, because they can help you reset it. The city has partnered with the Los Angeles County Bar Association, or LACBA, and they have a smart law referral service. So social equity individual applicants are eligible to receive up to 10 hours of pro bono legal assistance and up to 30 hours of low bono legal assistance for $35 per hour. To sign up for the pro bono or low bono legal assistance programs, please go to the link that's listed here, and then you can submit your information. TCR is also offering free coaching for social equity entrepreneurs. This is a great tool for folks that either haven't gotten into the application process yet, or they've gotten stuck somewhere along the application process. One of the coaches will, schedule you for a 15-minute virtual assessment to try to help identify what tools you need or where you're stuck and provide guidance, and then move you on for additional programming. The social equity team has also put together a job board. So the job board is intended to be a user-friendly platform for employers to promote different job openings and connect with qualified candidates who are interested in working in the cannabis industry. This is intended to, help businesses meet their local hiring requirements. There's also a workforce development component where employers and job seekers can get free coaching, interview training, resume review, resume writing assistance, etc. And for employers, they have training on recruitment and hiring, onboarding, retention, offboarding, and the different types of skill sets that may be needed by license type. And our most recent round of seed grant funding ended on March 31st, but Dr. Brown and her team have been applying for additional state grants, and if any of those grants allow for direct financial assistance, I look forward to them implementing a Seed 3.0 program and then letting folks know how they could apply for that direct financial assistance. So stay tuned for that. Important deadlines, again, the Department of Cannabis Control can continue to issue provisional licenses to local equity applicants through June 30th of 2023. Anybody that doesn't get their provisional license by June 2023 is automatically going to be routed into their annual application process. Of course, in order to meet their annual application requirements, you're going to have to complete the local annual licensing process. For DCR, any application that's abandoned after June 30th of 2023 must be refiled as an annual application unless you have an active state provisional license. June 30th is also the last day for general applicants to file for a new temporary approval application. July 31st is the last day for social equity individual applicants to file for a new temporary approval application. After that, all applications will have to be filed as annual applications. The city has limited non-storefront delivery, the retail storefront, and micro business with on-site sales to social equity applicants through January 1st of 2025. We do intend to hold additional lotteries until we've reached undue concentration for the retail storefront as well as the cultivation activities. We will be making some policy recommendations in the future to see whether or not policymakers are willing to allow for us to make some modifications to ease the land use burden, as well as increase opportunities in the commercial cannabis sector. So stay tuned for that. And then, of course, applicants are not going to have provisional licenses at the state level anymore beginning on January 1st of 2026. So all of our existing licensees need to transition to a local annual license and a state annual license before the business is no longer eligible for provisional licensure at the state level. So December 31st, 2025 is the last day any business will be allowed to operate under a provisional license. But depending on when a business's license expires, they may not be able to renew. The state is not allowing new renewal provisional applications to be submitted beginning on January 1st of 2025. So basically, we have put together a plan to ensure that local licensees have the ability to get their local annual license so that they can meet the state's annual licensing requirements sometime in 2024. And it's really going to be up to the individual business to ensure that they're navigating through the local annual application process as quickly as possible so that you can get into the state queue for your state annual license, because we don't want any business to have to stop operating because they were unable to meet a state deadline. And then, of course, we've kept our temporary approval renewal process open through December 31st, 2027. Folks will be able to renew temporary approval into the 2027 calendar year, and I'll cover that in a little bit more detail when we get into the annual application discussion as part of Module 4. Again, here are the links to the Department of Cannabis Control's resources. And we'll take a 5-minute break. We'll reconvene. Good evening, everybody. Gidget, if you're ready, we can go ahead and jump into part 3's question and answer session.
Okay, thanks so much. Here we go with our first question from Norman S. Can you operate on metric after receiving temporary approval?
So the metric system, which is the state's track and trace system, is administered by state agencies. So receiving temporary approval from DCR doesn't get you access to metric. You won't be able to do that until you've met the state's licensing requirements.
Ingrid A. asked, if I applied to social equity and was verified, but not chosen in the lottery, how do you start the process again?
So if you are a verified social equity individual applicant, you do have the ability to apply for non-storefront delivery, distribution, non-volatile manufacturing, cultivation processor, nursery testing. We will be administering a future lottery. And as a verified applicant under current law, if you were verified to participate in the 2022 process because you got verified in 2022, you would be able to participate in the upcoming lottery. So as we get more information on when the lottery may be administered, we'll put that out there, and then we'll notify folks that are eligible to participate via email.
Our next question comes from T. McD. Can we get a list of available properties that could be considered to relocate?
So there's never been a list, and DCR wouldn't be able to put together a list of properties that may comply. So if you have a proposed location, you could go through the land use review for that proposed location. If you're an existing licensee, you can submit a relocation request and we can vet the location for compliance. And, if it's eligible for further processing, you can either choose to pay the business premises modification relocation fee and start to move there, or you could decide to stay at your current location. Unfortunately, we don't have a list of available properties. We don't reach out to landlords or anybody else to see if they would be willing to do business with a commercial cannabis business. But we do have the tools on our website, our licensing map and ZMS, that you could utilize to try to identify compliant locations.
Thanks, Jason. We have a second question from T. McD. How do we update the licensing portal if it has incorrect contact information for owners? Excuse me.
It really depends on what information you're trying to update. If you're trying to update contact information for you as an individual or for the business entity, you can log into your ACA user account and you'll be able to edit some of your contact information. If the legal business entity record doesn't have the correct owners or primary personnel or financial interest holders, you could submit a modification request against the legal business entity record in order to update that information on the record. So it really depends on if you're trying to update your contact information as a user. And then ultimately, once you've done that, it'll sync with the records that your user profile is associated with. Or if you're trying to update like documents that have been submitted as part of a record.
All right, our next question comes from Ian E. What are the parameters/qualifications for manufacturing? Do we need a license if we're only dealing with CBD? All questions pertain to the infusion of food, for example, sugar, chocolates, honey, and salad dressings.
So anybody engaged in commercial cannabis activity need to have a local license as well as a state license, plus meet the other permitting requirements to engage. So CBD is a byproduct of the cannabis plant. So unless the CBD is derived from industrial hemp as defined by state law, if you are dealing with CBD derived from anything other than industrial hemp, you do need a license from both DCR as well as the state agency. And if you're infusing the CBD into any type of food product, at a minimum, you would need a type N license, which is for non-volatile manufacturing, to infuse food products, or depending on what else you're infusing or how you're extracting the CBD out of the cannabis plant material, you may need the full type 6 manufacturing type.
Thanks, Jason. Question from Lewis H. What is the availability for fee waivers, and how is the city assisting applicants?
So DCR earmarked funds for fee waivers for phase 3 retail round 2 applicants to try to help facilitate getting them through the application process using one of our state grants. The director recently got permission to extend the fee deferral program. Previously, fee deferrals, deferred fees were due within 6 months of the deferral being granted or licensure, whichever was later. And a lot of our phase 2 applicants that have had their fees deferred for a number of years were shocked when they finally met the requirements for temporary approval, only to be issued a $30-something thousand invoice to cover all of the deferred fees that needed to be paid before they would get their license. So council recently adopted a recommendation to allow her the discretion to extend the deferral up to 1 year after a license has been issued. The fee waivers themselves are all based on grant monies, and we have to apply for those grants in advance and then earmark them for certain programs. So I would recommend reaching out to the social equity team to let them know what your circumstance is, to identify whether or not you may qualify for a fee waiver or how you could qualify for a fee deferral. And then, of
Thanks, Jason.
course, I
Go
was
ahead,
I
I'm
was just
sorry.
no, sorry. For the, how's the city assisting applicants? I mean, there's a lot of different ways. The director has been very cognizant about the feedback she's got to simplify and streamline the process. And on the licensing side, we're doing everything possible to reduce fees, streamline, make things easier, improve processing times. And then, of course, Dr. Brown and the social equity team are busy putting together all types of collateral material and finding vendors and working with the legal team and the LA County Bar Association for the pro bono and low bono services, expanding the learning management system. The director has really put a focus on stakeholder and community outreach. And, as folks have seen, we've been doing a lot of more Q&A sessions and webinars and virtual meetings with folks and stakeholder meetings to get input about our processes and how we can better the processes and make them more efficient. So that's just a small sampling of what DCR is trying to do to assist applicants and licensees be successful. And we've recently got a series of almost 20 recommendations through the mayor and city council that will further streamline the annual application process so that we can get people an annual license before they have to actually meet all of the different permitting and operating requirements, because we know that folks now need to get that state annual license as well, and they can't do that until the environmental doc has been approved. So we've kind of shifted the final inspection and the demonstration that the business has met all of the different permitting requirements until after we've issued the annual license and after the business has gotten their state license, to kind of reduce that financial burden and give folks peace of mind. So there's a lot of things going on. I don't want to toot our horn too much, but the director has been very cognizant about trying to make the process better.
Thanks, Jason. Looks like we have one more question, and it comes from Christina B. Pertaining to the provisional license. If for some reason my initial approved building cannot meet certain requirements needed in order to pass inspection to obtain licensing, will we be able to switch our building to a different compliant building, or will we just lose our opportunity to get licensed?
So if your current building, for whatever reason, either you've lost site control, you've made a business decision that it's too expensive to do tenant improvements necessary to get the permits from building and safety or fire or public health, if you submit the business premises surrender form, that's a reason DCR may abandon an application. And then if we abandon an application, you have up to 1 year to refile that application. So that would give you a year to find a different compliant building and then pursue licensure at that specific location. And recently, City Council adopted one of DCR's recommendations to allow to extend the refiling period from 1 year to 3 years. So hopefully, City Council will be weighing a draft ordinance to effectuate that change, and hopefully they'll get it adopted so that folks that are in this situation don't have to rush into making other business decisions. They can be a little bit more deliberate and thoughtful, and they'll have more time if they do need to switch to a different location.
Thank you, Jason. I don't see any more questions in the Q&A, and we finished all those pre-submitted.
Oh, wonderful. Let's give folks just a minute or two to try to submit any other questions, and then we'll close the questions for this module at 5:50. And if we still don't have any more, we'll just recess early.